Welcome to Wildcat Science with Mrs. Haugo. This is the Lymphatic and Immune System, Chapter 16 and 17, and we are talking about the immune system, Part 2. And today we are talking about specific immunity, which is the final level of defense. So, specific immunity is your body's defenses against a particular pathogen. Unlike your non-specific immunity, it only works on one pathogen as opposed to working on all pathogens like a blanket statement. And it depends on antigen recognition. So think back to blood types in the cardiovascular system about antigens. Those are any substance that causes your immune system to produce antibodies against it. So each pathogen is remembered by a signature antigen, like a protein on a bacterial cell's membrane. And this antigen will stimulate a certain T lymphocyte or B lymphocyte into action. Your T lymphocytes are antigens activate T lymphocytes or T cells, and T cells are made in the bone marrow just like all other blood cells, and they will mature in the thymus. If you remember from your lymphatic system, your thymus is the mass of lymphoid tissue right below the sternum. And T lymphocytes are found in the blood, the lymph, and in lymph nodes. They circulate around your body. And they are part of the cell-mediated immune response. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. There are 4 types of T cells. One is your cytotoxic T cells, and these kill body cells that have been infected by viruses or bacteria or that have become cancerous. So they will actually kill your own body's cells, and that's one of the reasons it's called cell-mediated immune response. So there are 2 other types of T lymphocytes, your helper T cells, and these I heard a lot about with AIDS, because AIDS is a virus that attacks your helper T cells. So helper T cells signal to other cells to come and kill the pathogens. They also signal T cells and B cells to replicate rapidly. And they also tell B cells to make antibodies, and we're going to talk more about that later. So they are essential to your immune system, and that's why AIDS is such a devastating disease, because it kills your helper T cells, which makes you susceptible to all types of pathogens. Like you could die from pneumonia or the cold or common cold or something. And the 4th type are your memory T cells. These are cells that remember a specific antigen and are able to start a rapid response if the antigen is contacted again. So there was another type of cell that is your regulatory T cell. So that is the 4th type of T cell, and it suppresses the immune response when it's time to turn it off, so that your body doesn't go into hyperdrive and after it's killed all the pathogens start killing normal healthy cells, because that would create an immune disorder, and that would be bad for you. So it says, all right guys, we're done, and turns it off. Your B lymphocytes are also a very important part of your immune system. So antigens activate B lymphocytes or B cells, and B cells are made in the bone marrow, just like every other cell, every other blood cell, but they mature in the bone marrow also, which is different than your T cells. They circulate just like the T cells around your body. They're found in the blood, lymph, and lymph nodes. And they are part of the humoral immune response as opposed to the cell-mediated immune response, which means they're part of your body fluids, your humors, as it was called in like ancient Greek time. So when B cells are activated by a specific antigen, they start replicating rapidly and produce many antibodies, like a bunch in a second. So each B cell has its own lock, and when the specific antigen that unlocks that lock gets activated, then that's when the B cell starts replicating rapidly and producing lots of antibodies. So it will also, when a B cell is activated, produce memory B cells, which remembers that specific antigen and is able to quickly eliminate the pathogen in the future. Just to recap, so you have different B lymphocytes and they have different locks. They have different locks on them so that they are specific to a specific antigen. So you have lots of different types of B lymphocytes in your body. Antibodies are a very important part of your immune system, and I know that you've heard of them. And if you look here, there's these Y-shaped proteins. Those are antibodies that are attacking this virus. They are also known as immunoglobulins. You may hear that term, see that in your book. And they are large Y-shaped proteins produced by your B lymphocytes. And each antibody contains a specific lock for a specific key on the antigen. So every antibody is different. So your body has hundreds or thousands of different types of antibodies. An antibody can disable a pathogen by blocking an essential part of the pathogen. So let's say the locking key is here, and this antibody, it would actually be the blue sections that would go in on a specific part of a virus. And maybe that's the part of the virus that needs to connect with a cell to invade the cell. So the antibody can disable some pathogens that way. Or an antibody can tag a pathogen and signal to other leukocytes to come in and kill it, like your phagocytes. Looking a little bit more at antibody structure, they are Y-shaped proteins, and they all have this Y-shaped, but this part at the top is variable in each antibody, and that's why you have so many different ones and why they're specific to each antigen your body has ever come in contact with. And here's a 3D structure of the protein. So what could go wrong with your immune system? Allergies is one thing that could go wrong, and this is a false alarm immune response. It's when your body has an immune response when it shouldn't. So harmless substances like dust or mold or pollen stimulate an immune response. In essence, your body thinks dust, if you're allergic to dust, is a pathogen and is going to hurt your body, where in reality it would not. So antibodies are produced that attack the allergen, but like I said, that wasn't an allergen or that was going to hurt your body. So what are the results? You have a lot of inflammation, you have wheezing in your lungs, itchy, runny nose, watery, itchy eyes. You may have hives or other symptoms. And that is your body attacking the allergen that it thinks is dangerous. A severe life-threatening reaction to certain allergens is called anaphylaxis, and that is when the throat muscles close up and you cannot breathe. Autoimmune disorders are a type of immune disorder that happens when your body is not able to distinguish between healthy tissue and an antigen. So your immune response actually attacks normal healthy cells instead of pathogens, and that can cause a lot of problems. There are many different types of autoimmune disorders. Areas that are often affected are blood vessels, red blood cells, connective tissue, endocrine glands like your thyroid or your pancreas, and joint muscles and skin. Okay, that lines up a little bit better. So let's talk about a couple of different types of autoimmune disorders. One of them is rheumatoid arthritis, and that is when your immune system actually attacks the cells of your joint. This will cause inflammation, swelling, and pain. We talked a little bit about rheumatoid arthritis in the skeletal system. That was one of the type of arthritis that we discussed. Also, inflammatory bowel disease is an autoimmune disorder. This is when the immune system attacks the lining of the intestines and can cause episodes of diarrhea, rectal bleeding, urgent bowel movements, and many other things. So not very pleasant. And psoriasis is another autoimmune disorder. We talked about this in the integumentary system. And what happens there is you have overactive T cells will stimulate the skin cells to reproduce rapidly. So you just get more and more and more and more skin cells when you're not losing them. And it will produce silvery, scaly plaques on the skin, which can also be itchy. So different than autoimmune disorders are immune deficiency disorders. So you don't have enough of an immune response, as opposed to autoimmune disorders when you actually have too much or the wrong kind of immune response. So these are diseases that attack your immune system and prevent your body from fighting infections and diseases. They make you more susceptible to catching viruses and bacterial infections. So people can actually die from these disorders, but they don't actually die from this disorder. They would die from something like the common cold or pneumonia, something like that, that they would normally not die from. Their body would be able to fight off. They can be congenital, like you were born with it, or acquired. And the most famous acquired example is AIDS, acquired autoimmune deficiency syndrome, and this is where your body kills helper T cells, or the AIDS virus, kills helper T cells, and we know that helper T cells are important in fighting off infections and letting other cells know that they need to start making antibodies and fighting off the infection. So an example, congenital example, one that you're born with, is a lymphocytosis, known as boy in the bubble disease, and this is something you can look up online. There was a boy who was born without certain parts of his immune system, and so he spent all of his life in a bubble so that he didn't run into any pathogens. Immunotherapy is a fun technique. It's where you actually use your immune system to fight infections, other than what it normally does. So let's talk about how immunotherapy can be used in cancer treatment. Cancer cells are different from normal cells, and the immune system should kill cancerous cells. Often there are very few differences between a normal cell and a cancerous cell, so your immune system doesn't always recognize and destroy cancer cells. And this is when the cancer cells can start rapidly replicating and can cause problems. So researchers have found ways to help your immune system recognize cancer cells and strengthen its response to destroy them. So you can use your body's immune system to fight the cancer, and this has a lot of promise. That brings us to the end of our lymphatic and immune system notes. Good job, everybody.